Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine critical role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. And joining me today is Alyssa, and we are going over Campaign 1, Episode 8, because there is no Part 1 or Part 2, which I realized halfway through watching it. So hello, Alyssa. Welcome to you back again.
Always good to be here. It's always fun.
Yeah, so the icebreaker question that I came up with today is, what would you do with your time if money wasn't an issue? If you won the lottery, $30 million in your account tomorrow, what would you spend your days doing?
I craft all the time. And I do a lot of different things. I just like learning new crafts, new things to do with my hands.
I love that.
So I've got in this room 2 embroidery projects, a spinning wheel, a crochet project, and some partially made lace. So I feel like I could fill my time.
Yeah, I mean, it's all textiles too, and I'm a huge textiles fan, but I don't think I've ever had a spinning wheel in my house. Now, I'll have to think about that. My mom was
a little one.
Okay, cool. My mom was an art teacher for 25 years, so we always had like a fully stocked art studio that I could go raid whenever I wanted to. And I'm trying to think if she ever had a spinning wheel in there. I remember seeing one, but I don't know if it was at her house or not.
My parents turned basically the entire laundry room, which was not small, into a craft room for us kids, and just kept it stocked with whatever and was like, go for it, have fun, whatever you feel like making. And it formed some hobbies around crafting that have endured a little bit longer than I think they expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'd pretty much be the same if I had won the lottery and just could spend my days doing whatever I wanted. I've been wanting to get back into oil painting, actually, because oil painting is expensive.
Yeah.
Like, the supplies are expensive, the rags spontaneously combust, so you need like special trash cans. But yeah, I've been wanting to get back into that. But otherwise, I'd just be like reading and enjoying life.
Yeah, would probably be living somewhere that didn't leak. That'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the little things, right?
Yeah, bar might be low, but it's still a bar.
Right. All right. Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And as always, we love hearing your insights as well. So please comment, like, and subscribe below. And ready? All right, let's dive in. All right, so as we open this episode, Vox Machina have just broken their way out of Duergar stronghold castle that is currently filling with lava. There are some casualties in the group. Vax is missing a foot, Grog is missing entirely, and we have 2 completely petrified group members, Tiberius and Kima. They have found a quiet place for the moment, but there are waves of Duergar guards fleeing the lava, heading in all directions, so Keyleth casts Pass Without a Trace on the group. They managed to move their 2 petrified friends with them successfully to hide from the guards further down a tunnel leading further down into the earth. They find a small alcove where Keyleth casts hallucinatory terrain to hide them while they rest. They then launch into a discussion about how to best recover Grog from wherever the Duergar queen has dimension-doored both of them. Scanlan suggests they forget about Grog entirely and just leave him behind, and the group yells at him for his callousness. So Pike casts Greater Restoration on Tiberius, who then refuses to drop his Duergar god disguise and accent for most of this episode. They ask Clarota what to do at this point in time, since no one else seems to be helpful in any of this. And he suggests leaving petrified Kima behind, which the group also doesn't like. So Pike goes over and casts Greater Restoration on Kima too, who hits Pike with her sword mid-swing as she unfreezes. They make a huge deal about how Clarota dragged her out of the lava as they fill her in on what happened. And then Vex realizes that she can actually track the queen with her hunter's mark ability within the next 8 hours, but they really need to sleep and heal before confronting the queen. So they decide to use it to locate them right at that moment instead of waiting, discovering that they are nearby, resting as well somewhere in the center of the Duragar city surrounding them. They argue some more, but decide to take a long rest and recover before doing anything else. Pike starts trying to heal Vax's foot while Keyleth assists her, and Scanlan sings his song of rest, successfully growing some of Vax's toes back, but they realize that it's going to take some time to heal completely. Scanlan pulls Kima aside before they sleep to ask her to basically not to kill Clarota while they're all sleeping. She agrees, saying Clarota must make the wrong move first before she will attack him. Vax suggests that Kima and Clarota take the first watch, in fact, for bonding purposes. Kima sharpens her sword and tells them that if the stronghold has indeed fallen, the Duragar queen will probably take Grog to Kavarn, who is the otherworldly being who has taken over the Mind Flayer's hive mind and is presumably creating monstrous, stitched-together creatures. She then expresses her sympathy, guilt, and gratitude for getting them into the situation in the first place, since it was Allura who sent them down to find her. Tiberius asks her to put in a good word for him with Allura. As Kima tells them about her and Allura's backstory, Tiberius blusters around some more and does his thing. And then she asks who actually killed the Duragar king, and Scanlan identifies himself, so she thanks him directly. As she is telling them about the torture that she suffered at the hands of the Duragar, Keyleth asks if she's congratulating them for being murderers and starts poking her buttons with a bunch of questions, getting all up in her grill about losing Grog, questioning if Kima's life is even worth potentially losing him in the process. The entire group jumps in trying to dissolve the tension, and they all fail. Like literally every single character tries to jump in. Like Percy is the last one, and even he doesn't succeed in calming Keyleth down in any of this. Keyleth tells them about a vision, or Kima tells them about a vision she saw of Orcus and his horns, which hold great power, one of which is currently being worn by Kavarn. That's what she came down here in the first place to dispose of, to destroy Kavarn and return the horn to the Tal'Dorei Council to seal it away where no one else can find it again. Keyleth continues to be mad, but has one last one-liner that she throws in there for good measure. I hope you don't become what you fear most. Very ominous for Keyleth. The group makes a lot of awkward talk as they settle in. They take a long rest, and Vex immediately focuses on her hunter's mark, where she senses it leaving the larger cavern and heading further down into the earth before it fades away. Keyleth casts Pass Without a Trace on them again, so they continue on and follow in the direction of Vex's hunter's mark. They manage to avoid the Duragar search parties that are presumably looking for them as they decline into the tunnel. Continuing forward, Vex finds the scent of fresh blood, and they come upon a site of a fight with bodies of torn Duragar everywhere. She recognizes the tracks from earlier in the tunnel from presumably one of the stitched together monstrosities that Kavarn has been creating. Vex also finds Grog's scent in this pathway, luckily. Trinket pointing further down the tunnel where they find cart tracks, presumably from Grog being rolled through the tunnel. They travel for a few hours following the tracks. The temperature drops quickly as they eventually find a huge cavern containing a pit full of pieces of glass and bones. Vex casts Detect Good and Evil, and the whole area gives her very ominous undeadish feelings. Undeadish.
Ish.
Ish. Vex shoots an arrow that Tiberius casts light on so that they can see the cavern better, and it looks like the pit continues for farther than half a mile, so there's no way they're jumping this. They see the remains of buildings and walls littering the space, but that's really it, so they decide to have Keyleth create a slab of stone for everyone to stand on that Tiberius then moves with telekinesis. They polymorph Trinket into a kitten for the weight limit. Super cute. Pike also discovers that her sign of Sarenrae has a hairline fracture in it, which they believe happened because of her brutal killing of a Duragar guard in a previous episode. Tiberius attempts to fix it with his mending wheel before realizing that it was in the bag of holding that is currently in Grog's possession. There's a lot of angst in that between Orion and Matt, but they move on. And then they move across the bone pit. They get about 300 feet out before they hear a loud echoing scream across the cavern. Keyleth beast shapes into a giant eagle, and two gnomes jump on the back of her, and they take off toward the sound. They come upon a Duragar fight, some trolls, and a blur of something else, while the bones on the ground start to absorb everyone who is either standing in them or dying in them. One of the Duragar guards manages to jump onto the stone slab with them. They kick him and question him, which doesn't seem like the best approach about what's going on. And then Vex and Vax chuck him off the slab to his death. Keyleth uses her eagle sight to identify the stitched creature, which is somewhat human, somewhat many other creatures combined. It's got a lot of appendages going on here. And it's killing all of the Duragar and trolls very handily, with carnage going everywhere. They try to fly their stone slab past it, but are forced to roll initiative and get involved. The creature starts attacking them with its tentacles unsuccessfully. Vex casts Hunter's Mark and then shoots a hail of thorns at it. Tiberius slams the stone slab on top of the creature, spilling the whole group onto the ground in a very odd move, in my opinion. Vax attacks it with his daggers. Kima attacks it twice with her sword, and that's when they notice that it's actually slowly healing itself as they fight. Clarota casts Blur on himself, and the creature takes an unsuccessful opportunity attack against him. Keyleth releases the gnomes onto some stalagmites, and changes back into her regular form, but Pike sinks right into the bone pit up to her waist, so Keyleth casts Wall of Stone to create a donut dance floor for them all up and out of the bone pit. Percy shoots it twice but misses one. Scanlan blinds it successfully and gives an inspiration to Pike. Pike casts Guiding Bolt at it and then swings out toward Tiberius. And then it swings out towards Tiberius and Kima before leaping away, taking Kima with it. Vax takes an opportunity attack while Vex uses her blazing bowstring for 2 arrows. Tiberius stands up and casts telekinesis to break the creature's hold on Kima. Vax stabs it some more and then grapples it to the ground. Kima hits it with a divine smite, but starts getting pulled down by the bones on the ground. Clarota casts a lightning bolt at it. Keyleth uses Grasping Vine to yank Kima out of the bone pit, and Percy crawls to the top of a different stalagmite. Scanlan casts Vicious Mockery, calling it fat and tacky, and inspires Vax. Pike casts Guiding Bolt again, doing a serious amount of damage. The creature successfully breaks Vax's grapple and then breathes an acid gas cloud on Vex, Pike, Trinket, Kima, and Clarota. Trinket turns back into a bear form from the damage that he takes. And the creature successfully saves against the blindness Scanlan cast. And as Trinket tries to climb up onto the wall next to Vex, the creature takes an attack of opportunity, causing Trinket to fall unconscious into the bone pit. Everyone starts to panic. Vex uses her blood-seeking bow to shoot an arrow at the creature, but unfortunately Trinket fails one death saving throw. Tiberius casts Watery Sphere, but does not catch the creature in it. Vax stabs it some more, Kima hits it some more, Clarota attacks it with its tentacles and grapples it successfully. Keyleth casts Grasping Vine to pull Trinket's body out of the bone pit, but does not succeed. Percy pulls out bad news and successfully rolls a natural 20 on the shot, killing the creature off finally. It pushes him off the stalagmite, but it is glorious, scattering Vax with a spray of blood. Pike jumps off the wall using her holy mace of disruption to smash the bones that are trying to pull Trinket under, while Tiberius uses telekinesis to carry him up to Vex on the wall, who gives him a healing potion. Keyleth and Scanlan investigate the corpse, and they find many layers of teeth inside the body, but they also find magical bracers. Go for them. Pike heals Trinket up some more and leads the way through the bone field with her mace clearing the way. At the end of the cavern, they see a flickering column of light, seemingly campfire from the Durgar who are carrying Grog ahead. So Vax selts ahead and sees 2 Durgar, a huge troll, the Durgar queen, and a cart with Grog manacled with bands of iron around him. Grog is cut to hell, and they are apparently looking to turn him into one of those Stitch monsters as well. So Vax calls over the earpiece, telling everyone to come forward and fight, and that's where the episode ends. So that was a long recap of one whole episode, but what do we think about what happens?
It's an interesting episode because I think you see one of those very D&D dynamics where the DM is trying to get one thing done and the players just aren't picking up on it or are working towards something different, and you end up with interesting and tense situations.
Yeah.
I think that, unintentionally, we've got Matt and especially Marisha at odds in a lot of places in this episode. Which is not a dynamic that we usually see, but definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this in the last episode too, is like, there's a lot of player tension going on. Not necessarily, like there is character tension for sure, going on.
Oh yeah.
But there's also a lot of player tension going on, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's also hard to watch.
It is. It's cringeworthy, right?
Yeah.
Like, we even have like the Sam and Orion thing going on in this episode too. Like Orion is just being Orion in all of this, and Sam is being more and more sassy with each passing episode.
I can't blame him for it, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then we even see this whole exchange that I didn't mention in the summary of Sam calling the creature a girl derogatively and getting yelled at by all the women in the group because, of society and patriarchy and feminism. And then he's like hiding behind his book, and then he makes it a point throughout the entire episode of I love women, strong, powerful women. Like he peppers it in all throughout, and it's just, there's a lot of cringeworthy behavior going on.
Yeah, I'm glad they called him out on it, but it didn't want to watch it. Wasn't having fun with that. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the biggest thing was Matt trying to use Kima as a mouthpiece to like reassure some of the party's fears and like, you have this person who has been here, who knows this place, who can, help you find things. It's not the end of the world, you'll be okay. And that's not how it's taken by the Keyleth. A lot of the rest of the party just doesn't want them to fight, but I don't really think they're picking up on what she's saying either. So it's how do you feed your players information if they're not really a fan of the character you have in place to give them to that information?
Yeah.
It creates a dynamic that makes your life a little difficult.
Yeah. And what about like allegories, metaphors, stories? What are we seeing here?
I think I was really fixated on Keyleth this episode, and it's mostly because she's very much front and center for a large majority of it that isn't combat, even for the stuff that is combat.
Yeah.
But I think one of her things is she's not really angry at Kima. She's just scared. and she's taking it out on Kima.
Mm-hmm.
And so being careful to, you know, place that anger where it actually is meant to go, and to, you know, not to respect the people that are around you, whether, you know, because they don't deserve to deal with all of your own dysfunction in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure there's a cleaner way to point out that allegory. But I think it's a running theme throughout this episode.
And the campaign, arguably. Like,
That's fair.
One of the notes that I made was to be seen. This, I think, is one of the first instances of Keyleth and her history of lashing out at people around her when she feels stressed.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, whether she's scared, whether she's anxious, whether she's mad, like, whenever she's in a period of stress, she does tend to lash out at the people around her. And we even see this, especially with Kima. There's a benevolent authoritarian streak that Keyleth has of, like, she has kind of a control freak factor about her.
A little bit.
And I'm wondering, like, because even in the previous episode, it was Keyleth who said, is there anything we can do to slow her down in regards to Kima exploring the first floor of the Durgar stronghold? And she's obviously uncomfortable with having an NPC out of her control, you know, and doing things that aren't necessarily aligned with the group's decision making, you know, and we see that again with this interaction with Kima. And I honestly wonder, like, is it imposter syndrome showing up as a control coping mechanism?
It could be imposter syndrome. I also think it might be an anxiety effect where anything that isn't what she expected triggers a really strong response in her because it scares the crap out of her. And she doesn't know how to handle it. And we know that Keyleth is anxious. We know that, you know, she's, as much as she's been prepared for this position in life, she's terrified of it. And, you know, she's not exactly naturally suited to that position. And I think both imposter syndrome and just the fact that, you know, a more generalized anxiety response would both fit the pattern we're seeing.
Yeah, and it is one of the first instances where it really blows up in the group in this way. And it's interesting. I mean, moving over to personal experiences, like, it reminds me of my own unhealthy coping mechanisms over the years. Like, I had a really hard time with accepting Keyleth and Marisha as a character and a player when I was first introduced to Critical Role. And that was because I saw so much of myself in her. And yeah, I was just like, I don't like seeing that. Thanks. And so, like, I have had over the years very developed personal growth journey in my reaction to Keyleth and Marisha.
Yeah, I've come to really love Keyleth. I have, but I still have very strong responses to her, especially in these early episodes, where I see, you know, the parts of me that I don't like. And there's that saying that's the things you hate most in media are the things that you see that you don't like about yourself. And it holds very true here. Like the anxiety response, the snapping at her friends and her colleagues because she's stressed. Like, I relate to that. I don't want to relate to that.
Totally.
So it brings out some stuff in me that I would really rather it didn't, and it makes it hard to like Keyleth in this instance. I love her eventually.
Yeah.
Right now, I find her very difficult to like.
Totally. And like there was one moment that was kind of like an aha moment with me with Keyleth, and it happens during the Chroma Conclave arc in Westruun. And so we can discuss that once we get there. But it really took me years of watching Critical Role to be like, oh, okay, this is what I'm reacting to. Because I mean, I remember back in high school, I had some major anger management problems. Like I would blow up at my friends because I was stressed, and there was like a lot, like high school was really stressful in general. And so I would just like be an angry ball of angst often. And, you know, over the years, I had to learn these like healthy coping mechanisms versus unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think that that's what Keyleth is really navigating right now, is like, I don't think she's even gotten to the point yet in realizing how much her behavior is hurting the group as a whole yet. She's still in that blind stage of like, I'm behaving without really understanding the impact of my behavior.
And at this stage, she's still very juvenile. So, you know, you mentioned the one-liner she has at the end, and I've watched this episode 3 times in the last week. I still don't really understand where that came from, what it was referring to. It didn't make sense to me with what Kima was saying. I think it was more founded in her own fears and her own issues than it was with anything that Kima has.
Yeah.
And at this point, I don't think she knows the difference.
Yeah, totally. Like she wasn't listening to Kima to listen to Kima. She was listening to Kima in order to wait for her response so that she could get her response, that one-liner in. And I'm pretty sure she like had decided on that one-liner before Kima had even like begun speaking.
Oh yeah, that was like 2 paragraphs into the whole fight. She was going to end it with this cool badass line and walk away. Yeah, that's something that I definitely did in like middle school. You know, it's one of those like very young things to do.
Well, your mom smells.
Exactly. Like, oh, we're having this fight, well, I'm going to end it with this line, and you know, 2 minutes later that line doesn't make any sense.
Well, I've always hated your bangs.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that, but also in the, you know, I give respect when I think it's been earned. Like seriously? Respect isn't something you earn. That's
well,
I have a lot of thoughts about that line that are kind of tangential, but it plays into the, you know, responses that don't fully make sense in the context of the game.
Totally.
But sound cool.
We even have this stark contrast of Clarota staring us in the face right here. Because she instantly trusted Clarota.
Yeah.
Instantly. Like her and Bex in that cave finding Clarota, Kima was like, oh, a friend.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because they're sent for Kima. They have a connection to her.
Yeah.
You would think if anybody had earned that respect, it would be Kima.
You would think.
Not the mind flayer they found in a cave.
Right. And that's the thing. That's like what we're circling around, is that Keyleth's actions and behaviors don't make any logistical sense right now.
Yeah.
It's not logic that we're working with here.
No. I can rationalize them based on the emotion and like my understanding of having been there as a young teen, or as like, you know, someone who was figuring out how to function in social circles.
Yeah.
Which is very much what Keyleth is doing. It makes sense for the character. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah. For the longest time, I was like, I don't understand what is going on here. Yeah. I mean, are there any specific personal experiences that come up with you, or is it just like a general wash of middle school angst?
I try not to think about the middle school, high school angst. It's not a good time.
No.
But I was definitely one of those people to like make speeches, you know, not
No, I know
full-on
exactly what you're talking about, like monologue.
but like, you know, when you're in an argument with your friends, somebody's got to, you know, be the one to have the last line. And I was always aiming for that last line, always aiming to have the like cool exit or the, you know, all the things you read in books where, you know, you drop the mic and walk away.
Totally.
That was me. That's what Keela's doing. You know, I see a lot of the same patterns in the way she argues. So specifically, no, because we're not digging into that particular corner of my life because I don't want to, but I see that specific piece as something I know I used to do all the time.
And I was always the one that wish I could have the last one-liner. Like, I'm like, when I get into an argument with someone, I almost become nonverbal because my emotions and my physical response are so overwhelming to conflict that it's hard for me to even like engage in conflict with words. So I'm always the one that's like, you know, in the shower 8 hours later, where I'm just like, I should have said this.
Yeah. Not so much now, but especially growing up, I was very verbose as an, you know, argumentative teen, where I just like, even if it didn't make sense, would just keep arguing, just keep saying things. So I got a lot of the last lines, but mostly because people got sick of me and walked away, which fair. But yeah, a lot of like, you could just keep talking and the argument doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that was a big part of how I coped for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely understand what it's like to lash out at people. Like, my dad always had the phrase, like, you come home mad from work and you kick the dog, like, because that's just like the outlets of the anger that you have. And like, it's not right in any shape or form. And it's not like he was advocating for animal abuse,
right?
But it's like, there's a point where you need an outlet for those emotions in some shape or form. And you can choose healthy outlets or you can choose unhealthy outlets. But Keela's not even at a point of choice so far. She's not even at the point of awareness yet. And awareness is the first step.
She'll get there eventually. I have to keep reminding myself that she will get there eventually.
Yeah. We got to go through a whole lot of cringe first. Yeah.
Still fun along the way. Oof.
Yeah. Well, any other stories or metaphors that we found?
So this one's super silly, but it was the thing that like I got stuck on for the entire last half of the episode. My parents, I have 2 brothers, right? And there's 3 of us. And anytime we would encounter mud or puddles or anything that we had to like circumnavigate, they'd stand there and watch us and laugh and say, one goes over it, one goes around it, one goes through it. So as they were trying to figure out how to get through the pit of bone and glass, I was watching them like approach it, and it went like in that order. One goes over it, one goes around it, one goes through it. And it, you know, it was super fun to me to like see that dynamic completely out of context. But it made me so happy. And it was just this delightful like childhood memory of mine that kind of counteracted everything that came before it. That it, you know, I don't know what it was about that in particular, but it was just so reminiscent of, you know, this family that just everybody does things a little differently, but they're all fine with it. They're all cool as long as, you know, everybody's happy. Nobody cares. And I loved that. It was a good reminder of, you know, my own experiences, but also why I love this group so much is they're,
Totally.
they're that kind of people where everybody kind of does it their own way, and everybody's okay with it in the long run, as long as they all figure out a way to do it in the end.
I mean, that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, is like, that's one of the reasons why I have this podcast, because we each take these small, insignificant things that happen, these small, insignificant moments that happen, all hit us differently because we all have different reference points. And yeah, like for me, I was laughing about how they instantly hear a scream, run towards the fight, realize it's a fight that they don't want to be involved in, and try to run away from it. They're like, ah, ah, ah! Like there's a series of like bad falls.
Yep.
But that's D&D, and that's life too. Like we're just sometimes stumbling from one bad decision to the other before we're able to like rest and right ourselves, and be like, all right, not doing that again.
And once you get started, it's hard to stop, but at the end you have a really good story.
You're like, oh, okay. Okay.
In 6 months we're gonna laugh about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what makes this show so enduring, because it shows the imperfection of heroes' journeys. Because I think mainstream media often uses the imperfections as more of like plot points, more so than just like random shit that happens.
Yeah.
Because life is more of random shit that happens.
And in D&D, it's just, all right, that's the way things are, move on. It's not, we have to solve this flaw. Okay, let's work with it.
Yeah, totally. So what are we being called to take? What actions are we being called to take?
I think it's a combo of things for me. It's be careful, who's on the receiving end of anger and emotions, but also remember that people do things differently and in different ways, and it's all going to put you in the same place in the end, and that's all that matters. So putting that anger on someone else doesn't do you any good.
Totally.
It's accepting that maybe they just have a different path to get across the same obstacle, and different ways of thinking about it, and that's okay. And so kind of just stepping back and being a little less uptight about doing things the way that I think they need to be done, and not taking that out on the people around me.
Yeah. And I like what you said, and like not holding so much anger for other people, but I think also holding so much anger for ourselves too, when we do find ourselves in that situation. Because I know that I've beat myself up over the years for how much of an angst ball I was in high school. It's like, oh, that was shitty of me. But it's also coming to it with compassion for yourself and with others, and being like, yeah, I was going through a lot back then, and like, yeah, my response was actually pretty reasonable considering everything that I was going through and all of the weird expectations that I was grappling with at that time.
Yeah.
And so my actions are be nicer to myself and be nicer to other people. Because at the end of the day, we're just trying our best for the most part.
Yeah.
And like we work with what we have.
Give everybody a little space. A little bit of leeway goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think also what we're talking about here is honoring people's rights to change too.
To change and to choose.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Because that's what we're seeing with Keyleth here. And like, this is just the beginning of her journey with all of this, but we know there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And I know she's got a long way to go, but you can start to see it already. you know, even this early when it's this hard to watch, you can start seeing the bits that turn into something beautiful and patient and worthy of the voice of the Tempest. They're already there, but we have to let her grow into them. You know, we can't force her to be that person.
Yeah, what a soundbite, man. They're already there. We just have to leave her space to develop, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I'm going to end it. We can't get any better than that, right?
Cool.
Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I think I'm good. You know,
Yeah.
lots of talking about Keyleth this episode.
I mean, we're going to continue.
You know, that's because she tells such a fantastic story.
Yeah, and I really do think that a lot of the character choices were intentional on Marisha's part.
Yeah.
She does talk about that later on, but I mean, even we were talking about last episode, like we still have 20 episodes to go with Orion. 20!
I know this is a fact. It's still hard to believe.
I know. But just think we have like 10 times that with Keyleth.
Yeah.
So we've got a long time to discuss these evolutionary journeys of these characters.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Getting into the nitty gritty. Well, these are powerful themes that we're talking about per usual. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and stories and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives and how each of these characters have shown us a little slice of ourselves, whether or not we wanted to see them.
Yeah.
So special thanks to Alyssa for joining me on this episode. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, happy to be here, as always.
Yeah. So next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 9, I guess, since we didn't have any parts for this one. And joining me, I think, will be Alyssa. We'll have to talk about whether that's happening or not.
Sure.
But come back, see who shows up next time. We'll all be surprised, right? So as always, I'm looking for co-hosts and guests. So if you're interested in coming on this podcast and sharing your own perspectives, please reach out to me via email or on Tumblr. And I can't wait to chat with all of you. In the meantime, please comment, like, and subscribe below, or follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.